I'm very pleased to be here with Jennifer. Jennifer and I were colleagues not so long ago, so it's good to see her again. She is currently the Director of Accessibility Program and Innovation at RaLytics, which is a small business owned by veterans and people with disabilities. She is an expert and focuses on embedding accessibility skills, processes, and governance in the RaLytics offerings with a focus on human-centered accessibility so that customers can eventually learn to fish for themselves sustainably in the digital accessibility ocean. She was formerly on the Central Accessibility team at Microsoft, which is where we worked together. She ran accessibility design and has a strong record of innovation in accessible design and hackathon projects. She's won multiple awards for her contributions, especially to iGaze for Windows, might have heard of that, and also a variety of mental health apps. She received a special stock award from Microsoft for her contributions to accessible and inclusive design, and as many of you know, she is passionate about teaching accessibility in approachable ways. Without further ado, I'd like you to join me in welcoming Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jeremiah. All right, are we ready? We're all settled in? Let's do this, okay. So as Jeremiah mentioned, my name is Jennifer Zhang, and Jennifer X Zhang, if you want to find me on LinkedIn, because Jennifer and Zhang are very common names. Yeah, I'm the Director of Accessibility Program and Innovation at RaLytics, a accessibility consulting company that is service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. And today I'll be talking about the accessibility and quality disconnect. Lots of things can't work without power, and they also can't work without accessibility. Now, during my tenure at a previous company when I was a QA engineer, the company laid off half of the software development engineers in test and converted the rest to developers. My heart partially broke then because I had never been part of a layoff. That was really early in my career, and I had massive survivor's guilt. Also, so many of the people who knew anything about accessibility because they did regular test passes with accessibility test cases were also laid off. Nod to Blake. Blake, thank you for talking about psychology in the last talk, because after reading a big book of a big pile of psychology books, I read them, so you don't have to, but Blake probably already read them. Something jumped out at me, which was that change management, according to Wikipedia, is how to prepare, support, and help individuals, teams, and organizations in making organizational change. So accessibility at some stages is essentially a huge change management exercise. Organizational change because of resources and investments, and individual change because processes and skills will have to change and evolve to do accessibility well. And to get people to be okay with that change and even embrace it, we need to step back and understand that hesitation and reaction around accessibility, which is where the psychology comes in. So Chip and Dan Heath wrote a book called Switch, which is centered around Jonathan Haidt's elephant and rider metaphor for how people react to change. And essentially, elephants go toward something they're passionate about, and riders go toward anything they are logically or skillfully able to handle. So here is a motivated elephant. It sees accessibility, and it's charging right towards it, with the rider saying, I can deal with anything. So my elephant, I can brag a little here, hears accessibility and heads right for it, ready to tear down any barriers with a very strong trunk. I have the skills and passion to do it. My rider hears accessibility and leans into that elephant's direction. No overanalysis or fear here. I really can deal with pretty much anything that comes up. Not everyone is like that. This poor avoidant of change elephant sees accessibility and thinks about how they can go around it. You know how people are really good at development, design, and testing? And then you add accessibility, so it's accessibility development, accessibility design, accessibility testing, and then they go, oh, they pretend that I can't develop or design or test. Anyway, has anybody seen that happen? Getting some nods, okay, thank you. This is a major sign that the elephant is actually pretty scared. It turns out that elephants aren't scared of mice, they're actually scared of change. So for many people, when you mention accessibility, the elephant has an intuitive gut reaction to avoid it. Then the rider, who is relatively small on that elephant's back, can't make the elephant go towards accessibility, so the rider starts to make excuses for that elephant. Now, here we have a elephant has already said, nope, not doing accessibility. And so the rider then thinks, well, we're not gonna do accessibility, and then out of their mouth comes, well, I guess we can't because of X, Y, Z. And let's be honest, a lot of riders are actually fine not fighting the elephant's reaction because the riders don't feel competent themselves. And whether that's on an individual or organizational level. Common things I have heard over the years from the riders are, we care about that, but we have other priorities. That would take too much time. We will get to it if we get sued. I hate that one. We'll get to it if a customer actually asks for it. Another one I like is, our budget's already finalized for the year. We can't do that. All right, has anyone heard or said any of those things? All right, okay. And it's okay, I'm not here to shame or judge you if you've said those things in the past, but let's try and do better. All right, so, and those words are, again, I think I'm hammering the point a little much, but the rider is covering for the elephant. By the time you hear those words, the elephant has already reacted. So this elephant has gone around the accessibility and avoided it, and the rider says, sorry, maybe next time. The elephant's reaction is largely out of fear, and again, we lack the skills, we don't know how to execute on the details of accessibility. It will take more time to learn accessibility than we want to spend. QA has been cut in so many places along with accessibility QA talent, so how are we supposed to resource this? Testing is largely done to prevent lawsuits. So if we test ourselves and we test poorly, will we get sued? Isn't it easier just to outsource it all? No, it's not. So the elephant doesn't want to deal with any of this, and the rider makes a bunch of excuses to avoid it. Now, I will say, the elephant is not wrong. I totally understand the elephant's perspective, but there are ways to address this. Accessibility QA today is not done in a healthy way. I think the 2 hand raises earlier showed that. We'll address some of the solution, and we'll help your elephant be a little less reactionary later in this talk. But first, and I don't even know if I need to go through this again, but revisiting question 1, can we get 0 hand raises this time? Yeah, okay, so we can't really go much lower than that. I was gonna say, you know, we are, as a room, are kind of diluted, and we think we have good accessibility processes, but since that didn't happen, I think 2 to 0, you know, not much change. Moving on. What if I told you there is untapped growth opportunity and a big bundle of skills that are mostly being ignored? And that if you address those skills, you can also increase good user expectations when it comes to accessibility. Hopefully by the end of this talk, you will believe me. All right, so I took a lot of things from Wikipedia, can't you tell? The Wikipedia entry on software testing lists accessibility as a separate section, and this is a bad sign for accessibility in the industry. Accessibility should be integrated into all other types of testing, as accessibility is a key part of usability for everyone, beyond just the vital need for accessibility for people with disabilities. And yes, security and usability testing have their own separate sections in the entry, though there is a certain swagger and pride amongst those who do security and usability testing that doesn't exist in the same way for accessibility testing. If you've ever heard from security people, I'm so cool, I can hack anything. That's that swagger I'm talking about, and I would be less annoyed if that swagger kind of existed in accessibility, but it doesn't in that same way. Also, an aside on the disability rights movement for the term separate but equal, many places do try to do a separate accessibility interface that's equal, but it never is because the maintenance always falls behind other feature work, and accessibility makes experiences better, so separate is really counterproductive and a missed opportunity all around. For a physical example, the ramps that go into the back of the building because they're too ugly for the front of the building, things like that are not good and not inclusive. And actually my friend and I, my friend who uses a wheelchair, and I once got stuck in a freight elevator area for 20 minutes trying to get into a restaurant because no one was answering the phones, they couldn't hear me banging on the door from inside the loud restaurant, and they had forgotten that they'd buzzed us up from the elevator. So that was really fun. If you want to look up disability tax or CRIP tax to find out more about that separate but equal phenomenon, there's some interesting stuff on the internet. All right, common types of accessibility testing. These are industry-specific terms that do map to QA terminology, but the mapping can feel pretty opaque. So here's a cross-reference. We have automated testing, which catches around 30% of possible accessibility compliance bugs. Unfortunately, it is uniform, generic, it's not tailored for product context, and sometimes it has false positives. There's the trusted tester methodology, which is a methodology and a certification from the Department of Homeland Security that largely uses the Andy browser plugin and color contrast analyzer tool. And both of those first methods map to roughly code correctness. And then there's assistive technology testing, which is usually an assistive technology matrix tested against some core scenarios, and that tends to map to end-to-end integration and black box testing. So given this table, what types of testing are missing? Can you all throw out some types that are on the list? Yeah, go ahead. Design testing, great. Manual testing, mm-hmm. One more. Yeah, Anna.
I know that pretty much everybody becomes with limited accessibility at some time. For example, if you're crossing the road and you're on the phone, you're not watching, no, you're impaired. So I would say, like, everything.
Everything, I love that. Is there one more? Yeah, go ahead.
There's no type of like dexterity testing, right? Something that I always complain about is when web elements are further away here, right? If you have limited mobility, you've got to do something very quickly. That's never considered, right? It's very difficult to do in an automated way.
Like a disappearing menu?
Yeah, like a disappearing menu would be a great
Disappearing menus are terrible, yeah. And I think that those all kind of fall under some of these other categories. So bug bashing, exploratory testing, bug bashing, like, it falls under types of manual testing. Smoke testing, build verification testing, unit testing, regression testing, automated regression testing. So thank you for your answers on that. And I will say that if testing is to find the true state of things, then this is a pretty dangerous Titanic iceberg, because we're not getting the full picture because so much is below the waterline. So above the waterline, we have automated trusted tester and assistive technology. And below the waterline, we have exploratory, smoke, build verification unit, regression, and automated regression testing. That's a scary bunch of things below the waterline, honestly. There might be some mega sharks down there too. I haven't really looked in a while, but honestly, ogres and accessibility are like onions. They have many layers. My friend Anna made me put Shrek in the slides, so that's for you, Anna. So for accessibility bugs, you really have to fix some layers before being able to get to more in-depth layers. We will never get to the middle of the bug onion the way we're doing things now. Like, I mean, never. So here's what I've seen happen. Too much. Here's what's, so the common approach is to check in your code and then assume that the test vendors will take care of the rest with automated tools, trusted tester, and assistive technology. And what's better, and even practical with what's done today above the iceberg, is to test with those automated tools, test with trusted tester methods, do that code correctness, fix all those bugs, and then test with assistive technology. Crucially, check-in is now not the first thing in this list. And if we could get that much accomplished as an industry, this alone would make accessibility so much less painful. And this also matches other processes for product lifecycle that emphasize code correctness checks before any manual checks anyway. So this lets the manual test process find deeper layers of that bug onion. Caveat here, step 4 does require people who have been trained on how to test with assistive technology, preferably in combination with people who use it as part of their lived experience. All right, so the benefits of step 3, one automated accessibility issue can result in many accessibility manual test pass bugs. So, if they have that same underlying root cause, why would you waste time filing a bunch of manual bugs that all go back to one automated issue? That is just silly. Bugs cost a lot, right? We all know bugs cost a lot. And this is true of all bugs, though it is particularly an issue with accessibility bugs industry-wide right now. IBM and the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST, did a study talking about relative bug costs. And so if 1x is the cost of addressing a bug in that design testing phase, then 30x is how much it costs post-release. And really, with the way accessibility testing is done today, we are looking at closer to 30x overall, especially factoring in that, like, a lot of places are like, you can have a remediation plan, you can fix it next release. So, 30x range here. To find more bugs earlier, we need to get to deeper layers, and adding types of testing helps us get to those deeper layers. Okay, let's get back to helping our elephant. So testing better with unit testing with accessibility code review. Very few devs are skilled at accessibility code review to the level that it is needed. There are very skilled developers to follow here, though, who have a lot of writing out there. Scott O'Hara, Sarah Higley, Mark Stedman, great resources in web, mobile, and desktop. Testing better with smoke testing and BVT. You can have a check-in manual test script that takes 5 minutes with a little practice. And this is rarely done before a manual test pass. So much money is wasted by testing when products aren't ready to be tested in depth for accessibility. And so there are cycles, I've seen cycles where the same bugs are found over and over and over and over every test pass. And it is so frustrating for everyone involved. One thing here, and aside, please, let's stop calling it sanity testing. Please, please, please. This is so ableist. According to Wikipedia, a sanity check or sanity test is a basic test to quickly evaluate whether a claim or the results of a calculation can possibly be true. It is a check to see if the produced material is rational, that the material's creator was thinking rationally, applying sanity. Now, this is very ableist because there's a lot of history with forced institutionalization of women because their husbands claimed they were insane because they wanted to get rid of their wives. And also just, I have anxiety and depression, yet my code does pass sanity testing. Thank you very much. So yeah, let's change that terminology, please. All right, so testing better with bug bashes next. Bug bashes are incredibly valuable, and I think they're a lot of fun. Early on in my accessibility career, I learned so much from doing bug bashes with experts in accessibility in the room answering questions. I am a bit nostalgic for the in-the-room bug bashes with pizza, though this can work really well with remote bug bash sessions too. And then regression tests, testing better with automated and manual regression tests. Often the regression test is just testing accessibility again as a full test pass the next time it is scheduled. That is an incredible waste of resources. We can do so much better with manual regression testing, and there's so much room to grow with automated regression testing. So here are a few just simple, basic ideas for what you can do with automated regression testing. You can check if tabbing forward is a circular tabbing, so goes all the way through and then starts over again with the same elements in a circle over and over again. You can check if shift tabbing going back is the exact opposite of that shift of that circular tabbing going forward. You can see if you can access every actionable element via keyboard so that you can do everything with keyboard that you can with mouse or touch. And you can also check to see that you're never stuck in a focus trap. And those are the basic of the basic. That's not even with assistive technology turned on. And there are so many more things that can be done through automated testing. I'll leave it as an exercise for you all to get creative with that one. Okay, now that we've illuminated the testing types that were below water and they are now above the waterline, how do we feel about this iceberg? How are your elephants feeling? Any better? Getting better? All right, good. And there's still part of this iceberg under the water. It doesn't cover everything. As you mentioned, right, with design testing, I didn't cover that. But this requires a whole shift left effort that goes into planning and design. There are lots of talks on this whole shift left, inclusive design stuff. In fact, Inclusive Design 24, hashtag ID24, is happening in a few weeks online for free. So do check that out if you're interested. Okay, so now that I've given you some idea of what was below the waterline and we have moved it above the waterline, here's what could be practical someday. And I'm not being prescriptive. This is a rough outline. You can figure out how best to incorporate it into your processes. You test with automated tools, test with trusted tester methods, and code review. Those are all code correctness. Fix all things from steps 1 to 3 before check-in. Then run smoke tests and build verification tests. Run automated and manual regression tests. And then finally, test with assistive technology. All right. As we've discussed today, QA accessibility uses different terms, has separate processes, and misses large chunks of testing types. I feel like I can say this, we QA people love finding problems and fixing them, and I still consider myself a QA person even though it's been years because I test accessibility all the time, even not as an actual QA professional. So you can let that one slide. We QA people love finding problems and fixing them, so let's fix this and bring that QA bar way up. And honestly, it's gonna make all of us, all of you, all of us, better at our jobs to get the skills embedded to do all of this stuff. And with that, thank you very much. That's it. Do we have time for a question, or are we over time? Okay, does anybody have, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, so love the passion, but I see the challenge as well. So I'm a consultant manager, so I'm trying to convince clients that testing is needed in their projects, right? I mean, I find the challenge of like even convincing to have testing in projects. So how do you challenge better when it comes to accessibility testing to, like, when we are struggling to get testers into the projects, like asking for accessibility space?
Yeah, and even, I mean, do you have to ask specifically about accessibility? Can't you just incorporate it? Because if you look at the stats on this slide, right, this has been really valuable when I was at Microsoft for getting internal team buy-in to even think about accessibility testing. Because they're like, oh, we're good at bugs. I'm like, well, but what about these 300 accessibility bugs that you've delayed for several years that is now costing you like $1 million, right? So, I mean, if you can't get tests in at all, this is a good study to look at. And then if you can't get accessibility tests, there's kind of addendum, additional things and messaging around that. Does that help? I know it's more complicated than that, but roughly. Yeah, go ahead.
One could say, well, go ahead and Google CloudStrike. I mean, or what? Oh, hello. Thank you. And with accessibility, I don't think it would be that hard to Google how many times people have been sued for not having their websites being accessible. I was, up until recently, working for Pluto TV/Paramount, and we didn't have separate accessibility test passes because if subtitles didn't work, someone was going to sue us.
Yep.
You know, the FCC was extremely hardcore about subtitles, which is an accessibility and, for me at least, a usability thing as well. And so we just did it every single time. And I like better the idea, like that chart you showed with the 7 steps. The first 6 steps should happen for everything. It's not just accessibility. Do a code review and fix stuff before check-in. You know, make sure your unit tests pass before check-in, et cetera.
But like I said, you throw in accessibility and people go, I don't know how to do that.
Don't make it a separate thing. Say it's you have to have subtitles have to work.
I
You have
agree.
to have color contrast, tab order. That's usability.
Yeah.
That's something that's everybody.
We haven't even talked about inclusive design, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly that concept. Yeah, go ahead.
So, oh, sorry, I have one addition. So the section 508, the certification, that really does help. Like I've asked the testers to sort of get certified so that we could use that as a way of saying, we know what we're doing, but at the same time, I'm trying to see if there are any other ways that there's a marketable way to advocate for accessibility testing.
So this 30-ish% of accessibility testing, automated testing gets at 30% of compliance. And compliance is, you can use it, but you probably will hate using it because it's not efficient, it's not delightful, it's not any of those metrics that you look at for NPS or anything. So, I mean, if the company doesn't care, that's one thing. Like, level of investment matters too. So, I mean, we can talk more later, but yeah, you go ahead.
How would you respond to maybe leadership here that is not, intentionally not interested in accessibility because they argue it from a security perspective? They say, well, we have to have these catch-ups that are not very accessible because we're trying to stop bad actors from using automation because, as you're well aware, most test automation relies heavily on accessibility tools, and if you have a bad actor out there, they use it as an argument against it. How have you attempted to skirt that issue or explain to them?
Bad actors take advantage of security holes for accessibility too. A lot of people with disabilities, because they can't use the software or the two-factor auth or the things that are there for security, they have to come in with another party to help them log in, to help them do their banking, to help them look at their medical record. And that is a huge security hole too, because you can't guarantee that like your family is good actors with your bank account if you can't even look at how much money you have in your bank account, right? So like that concept amplified for the security industry, I mean, it's the same thing. If you've got your security structures and it's not accessible, you're opening holes there. And I'm at time, so thank you very much, everybody.